I first saw Srila Prabhupada when he arrived in Detroit in 1971 to visit our temple. And it was a big, big reception for Srila Prabhupada at the airport. Many, many devotees were there. They'd come from everywhere. They'd come from Chicago, New York, St. Louis. Even some devotees came as far away as the West Coast. And Prabhupada had been away for some time, and many of us had never seen Srila Prabhupada. So when he arrived at the airport, it was a tumultuous kirtan. Satsvarup Maharaj describes it quite nicely in his Prabhupada Lilamrita. What I remember is that Prabhupada got off the plane and he was coming through the airport way there, and we were having big, big kirtan. As soon as Prabhupada turned the corner, I was looking through my camera, because in those days there weren't many photos of Srila Prabhupada. Actually, the only photos I'd ever seen were a few black and white photos. So in those days, a photograph of Srila Prabhupada was something very rare and something very special. If a devotee had a photo, he would keep that and treasure it. And often during our japa sessions, if a devotee had a photo of Srila Prabhupada, we'd all sit around the photo and chant like this. So I was very eager to get a photo of Prabhupada, of my own. So Prabhupada came and he turned the corner, and I was looking through my camera. And I saw Prabhupada, and I thought, Prabhupada looks just like he does in the photographs, was my thought. But meanwhile, all around me, there was this huge kirtan, and devotees, especially devotees who had had Srila Prabhupada's association before, everyone broke out crying. And they fell to the ground, and there was so much sobbing and weeping, and I looked around. I remember my godbrother Balasva Prabhu, he was next to me, and he was, when I first joined, he was a hero for me because he was a Sankirtan leader, he was a good kirtan man, he was a very good preacher and a leader, and I had this image of a very tough devotee, but he was on the ground and he was just crying, Prabhupada, Prabhupada. And I looked around and I thought, why am I not crying? I must have so many material desires in my heart that I can't cry when I first see my spiritual master. So I just put my camera in my bag and fell on the ground. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna. Then I remember Prabhupada came in to where the group of devotees were, and he embraced Kirtananda Maharaj, and he patted Bhagavan Das on the head. It was very, very sweet. And he sat down, or we took him, I can't remember exactly, we took him to not far away, there was a chair we'd set up for Srila Prabhupada. And he started giving a lecture, but I was so mesmerized just by seeing him after meditating on him for so many months. I'd only been a devotee for a few months. Seeing him like that in front of me, so amazing. And but I remember one thing from his lecture. And through the years I've met godbrothers, Bhakti Bringa Govinda Maharaj, Pragosh Prabhu, other godbrothers who I didn't actually know at that time. And we would reminisce about that first time Prabhupada came and we saw him. And we all remember the same sentence that Prabhupada said in that lecture. He said, please believe me when I tell you, you are not this body. And that just entered into my heart. And, it convinced me, I'm not the body. I'm a spirit soul. I'd been reading it so often in Prabhupada's books and heard it in the lectures, but when Prabhupada looked at us, he leaned over a little bit and he said, please believe me when I tell you, you are not this body. So powerful. As Prabhupada said, the chanting of Hare Krishna is always beneficial, but it's especially potent when it's heard from the lips of a pure devotee. Prabhupada came to the temple, and I remember the first morning Prabhupada came down to give class. And Bhagavan's wife, Krishna Bhamini, she had her first child, Vaishnava Das. And she was standing near Prabhupada's Vyasasan, so Prabhupada came down the stairs of the Detroit temple and we were having a kirtan. And then Prabhupada walked in and I was standing right near Krishna Bhamini. And her son, Vaishnava, had kartals, little kartals. He must have been, I don't know what, he was under 1.5 or something. Probably one. But he had these kartals and he was playing the kartals, like I'm not exaggerating. He was playing like so sweetly and in time to the kirtan. So Prabhupada walked by and he saw this. And he stopped and oh, that's very nice. Then he sat down on the Vyasasan, and instead of picking up the kartals himself and chanting Jaya Radha Madhava, he just started speaking about this boy. You see how this boy, he is playing the kartals so nicely. This could only be because he was devotee in his last life. I remember Krishna Bhamani, she just big smile on her face, and all the, the mother, their child devotee, so she was so happy like that. And then Prabhupada gave a lecture about how he was quoting Bhagavad Gita, how the unsuccessful yogi, he takes birth again either on higher planets or he takes birth into a family of wealthy merchants, or he said best is to take birth in the family of brahmanas, devotee. He said, so these children are very, very special. You must take very good care of them. So that remained in my mind, that impression. A little later on the day, I was grihastra at that time, and my son was 1 or something, 1.5, just learning to speak. Some words were coming. And I had him on my shoulders. I was chanting my japa around the castle. In New Mayapur we had a chateau, and Prabhupada's quarters were upstairs. So Prabhupada came to look out his window. I was taking my son around and then my son, Gaura Shakti, he saw Prabhupada up in the window there, and he went, Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Prabhupada. I thought he was going to fall off my shoulder. He was, Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. And okay, hold on. And Prabhupada waved to him. We'd see Prabhupada waving. And that night, when Prabhupada gave darshan up in his quarters, he brought up the incident. He said there was one young boy that he was going around with his father around the castle, and he saw me. He started chanting Prabhupada, Prabhupada. So he said, this is Krishna consciousness. These children, we don't know who these children are. Maybe there is some connection from some previous birth. I thought, oh, my son. Like he said, these children, he said, they're so enthusiastic when they see me. He said, maybe there's some relationship from previous birth. Hare Krishna. Prabhupada stayed, I can't remember how many days, but I really wanted to be initiated. I'd been a devotee about 8 months. But Bhagavan had this policy. He said that none of the devotees he'd ever recommended for initiation had ever left. And he was very strict that you had to wait 1 year. And this was unusual in those days because devotees were getting initiated after 6 months, 4 months, 1 month. Sometimes people would walk off the street, and devotees in the naivety that you have to get initiated by a pure devotee, and then they'd sit down and some states, many left. But I really wanted to be initiated, but I didn't get the authorization to get initiated. So I thought, but I want Prabhupada to know that I'm his disciple and I'm aspiring from him. So just as Prabhupada was leaving the Detroit temple, he was going out to the car. I ran upstairs to my room, and I thought, I'll give Prabhupada a donation. I'd heard something about a Bhaktivedanta book fund, BBT, Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. In those days it was called a book fund, I think. Hadn't been named, incorporated yet. So I ran upstairs, and when I joined the temple, I'd given all the money I had, which was about $2,000 or $3,000. I'd given that to the temple. But the temple president allowed me to keep $10. So I went and I got the envelope, and I took out the $10 that I was saving for emergency. And for me, it was a lot. It was some kind of security if I couldn't get something in the temple. So I put in an envelope, and I wrote a short letter because Prabhupada was walking out to his car. Dear Srila Prabhupada, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to you. Thank you so much for coming to Detroit. It was a very short stay, but I learned so much during your visit, and I became very attached to you, and I'm very sorry to see you go. I'm going to feel so much your separation when you go. And then I put in the envelope and I sealed it, and I ran downstairs, and Prabhupada was outside. He was just getting into his car. And I said, Srila Prabhupada! And I yelled it very loud. I was at the door, and he was maybe 30 yards, 40 yards away. All the devotees stopped, and everyone looked around, and Prabhupada, he looked. I said, I have a letter for you. So I ran, I paid my obeisances, and I gave the letter, and Prabhupada folded it, and he says, Hare Krishna.